I think it's important for our listeners to know that we are learning how to do this.
That's right.
We both got great encouragement after reading Adam Grant's book on hidden potential that you start before you're ready.
That's right. We are doing it. We are the living examples.
We literally had one of our guests have to tell us to hit the record button because we had forgotten to do that. So we will figure out sort of the right kinds of ways to share this.
Yes. Join us on the adventure.
Welcome to A Life Worth Working, a podcast about how we get to the soul of work. We're your hosts, Michelle Weise and Dana Walsh. I'm an education and workforce strategist, and Dana is a senior pastor at a progressive church.
As always, we love hearing your comments, questions, and thoughts. So please know you can email us at any time.
So Dana, you and I were taking a walk together and just getting to know each other a little bit better. And I think I was sharing with you that I had to give a commencement speech. The title of the speech was Nothing is Wasted. And this is a topic you've delved into in past sermons. And so we got really excited as we talked about this concept of nothing being wasted. You even talked about it in terms of compost and manure.
That's right. This was actually the last sermon I gave at my former church. And so it was my goodbye swan song there. And I based it off of starting a community garden. There's such a beautiful thing about a community garden, the way that it's inefficient and you're gathering a whole group of people that don't know anything about gardening, but want to be together and want to grow produce for people who are hungry. And I didn't realize that the garden doesn't start with a ribbon cutting or, planting adorable seedlings. It just started with a huge pile of stinky compost, thinking, wow, this is how it begins, huh? And yet that's so much of life. That's how we begin. That's how we start. And I realized what fertile ground there is in the scraps and in the screw-ups, in the things that everybody's discarded and thinks that there's no potential in. So when I heard your talk and the title of it being Nothing Wasted, it just right away resonated that there was so much overlap. And then when you sent me your commencement address, I couldn't help but think about, wow, there's incredible alignment with the work that you're doing, Michelle, and with the work that I do through my job as well.
I am so excited about this work because I have been looking at the future of work and skills-based hiring and ways to prepare learners better for the future. I feel like there's something hugely missing from these conversations about the future of work, where, yes, we have to deal with AI, we have to deal with longevity, but how do we think about fulfillment and purpose and meaning? And how do we also make sure we feel like we're spending our time wisely in this one life that we have?
Now, tell me what has gotten you to this place in your career where you're thinking about this work professionally.
I got to work with the godfather of disruptive innovation, Clayton Christensen, and wrote a lot of pieces with him. And I've written a book called Long Life Learning, Preparing for Jobs That Don't Even Exist Yet. So I've been nicely perched and in this privileged position of looking at all the innovations happening in education and the workforce. It's really easy for me to get immersed in statistics and any sort of white paper about AI and the future of work. It's a lot harder to bring in the personal piece of this, understanding how fulfillment plays into my everyday contributions in the world.
I'm so curious that you began your journey in academia as an English professor, right?
I did. I taught 20th and 21st century American literature, fiction, and poetry.
I just love that. And so you've really lived into this work of making transitions in line with your values, continuing to seek your own passion and knowing that it meant actually making changes to your own work life and your call.
Initially, what really pulled me out of academia was I had been heads down doing all these things to achieve that end goal of being a professor. It's a long slog going through a PhD program. And I made it and I had this incredible tenure track role. But that was actually when this question of vocation and calling really hit me for the first time. I think I had been heads down, and it sounds really weird because it's at the age of 30 when I'm suddenly questioning my calling. Why didn't it happen earlier? But I think in that hurdle jumping, high achieving mode of just ticking the boxes and doing the next thing, I just kept doing. without really questioning why and really getting curious about what it was that I was actually trying to do with my life. But when I finally hit that supposed goal, something felt amiss. It's strange, but I remember vividly feeling like I was wearing a suit that was way too big for me. It was real imposter syndrome. I was pretending to be a professor. And the nagging feeling that kept hitting me, it finally came to a head when I had my first child. And that was actually a really helpful moment because it crystallized for me that I wasn't willing to make the trade-offs for that position. So I was supposed to write a book for tenure, and I had to write this book that I had no interest in writing. And I couldn't make that trade-off. Like I couldn't put this newborn baby into daycare to do that. And so that's when I realized this doesn't feel like a vocation to me. I knew something was off.
Oh, Michelle, I find that so powerful. There was something that signaled to you that the sacrifice for this work wasn't in alignment with your most deep yearning there.
Yeah.
And that's helpful clarity too, because sacrifice is going to be in most of our work, but there is something there that signals, wait, it's not right to sacrifice in this moment for this work. And that's helpful clarity there.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that so many people would find resonance in the story of working really hard and proving that I can do this, and then saying, why am I doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there becomes this transition in our careers where it's like, okay, I know I can do this now, but do I want to keep doing this? Like, why am I doing this? I can resonate with that. I've seen that in my own work.
I think that's going to be the resonant theme in so many of the conversations we're having and going to have. It's this curiosity about the why in our lives. I'm curious, Dana, because you had a pretty powerful sense of calling pretty early on, right?
I did. I was always a weird kid like that. That faith felt really important to me, even though I grew up in a household that was not religious at all. So I often say that it was my act of teenage rebellion to go to church because it totally panicked my parents that I had this desire at all. And in fact, it led to some of our biggest arguments. When I was 16, I got my driver's license and I just started driving to different churches on Sundays. And they were like, stop doing this, please. And so I ended up compromising and going to church with my grandparents. It ended up being this good...
What were they worried about?
They really had this in their mind that I was going to get sucked into a cult, and just thought of religion in the most nefarious way. Like they were trying to steal my non-existent 16-year-old money. I have nothing to offer anyone. But anyway, it was so hard. Looking back on it, it's just kind of, it is laughable, but in that moment it felt very real in my house. So faith was always important to me. And I grew up in a house where both my parents, had gone to school. My mom became a nurse. My dad became an engineer. So these very straightforward paths into careers that almost had very clear job security that came with them. And so the idea of a liberal arts education, just this vague exploration, did not sit well with my parents at all. There's a lot of anxiety around that. I even remember when my parents dropped me off at college, we were talking to the barista at the coffee shop, and the barista was like, oh, I graduated a few years ago from that school. My parents started panicking. They pulled me aside. They were like, this is our nightmare. You better not be working at a coffee shop after we're done with this 4-year education.
They saw a vision of your future.
Yes,
right there.
Even though that was never going to be me, but that they were projecting all their fears all the time. And that really was shaping in that way of like living under their fear and anxiety. And so I just assumed I was going to become a lawyer. I grew up in Fairfield County, Connecticut. It was like, well, that makes sense. That's what you do. It seems like a profession where you're going to have some money and job security. Okay, fine. And I was really focused on that throughout my undergrad time. And then it really took a few key people in my life in my senior year of college saying, why are you going to law school? This just doesn't feel like you at all. And so I was willing to open the door a little bit into saying, okay, I'm going to put one application in to one possible seminary. If I get in there, I will be open to it. So I get into this seminary and I get a full ride. And so I say to myself, okay, why not? Why not just open this door and walk through it and see what happens? Not ever thinking I would become a local church pastor.
What did you think you would be doing?
Where I went was Princeton Theological Seminary. Lots of people go on to get PhDs. And I felt way more comfortable with sitting around thinking about religion and studying than the idea of leading a church, because I didn't grow up in the church, so I had no idea what that actually looked like. And I had a terrible fear of public speaking. So between the two things of church feeling like this unknown world and then this horrible fear of public speaking, I never saw myself serving the church. But at my seminary, you had to take speech every single year and preaching, and you had to become an intern in a church. So between both of those pieces of being forced to deal with my fear of public speaking and then also being forced to work in a church, I fell in love with with being with people, with connecting with people, with the value of community, intergenerational community. And I started to see my call shaped not through one big thing that happened that feels like it would have been way too easy, but through lots of little conversations, little opportunities to lead. It was really a gift, and it came about in ways that it was easy to miss. I had a few key people in my life saying, "Oh, look at that. That really meant a lot to you when you were able to bring a group of high school kids on a service trip. You loved doing that. You felt really alive in that moment. Remember that one-on-one you had with somebody who talked about it for half the week?" And so I started piecing these things together and saying, maybe there's something here.
I still can't get over the fact that your rebellion was going to church.
Yes, yes, yes.
That's amazing.
I know.
You were like the best kid ever.
Michelle, I tell my parents all the time, do you know how lucky you were that was your biggest problem with your teenage daughter?
Yeah. And the compromise was you going to church with your grandmother. Fine.
Exactly. Seriously. I know.
Oh my gosh. So, Dana, because you are our resident expert on the historical understanding of calling, can you just walk us through what this word even means?
Yes. The only people that used to have a sense of call are priests, monks, nuns. So these are, you're called to a religious life exclusively. In the 16th century, Martin Luther comes along and expands, democratizes that sense of calling and talks about ordinary work as having a sense of calling, that we could use any work that we partake in can be an act of service. We could find purpose and meaning in, whether we're serving and working at a bank, whether we're a lawyer, a doctor, whatever field that is, that we use our work in order to serve the good of others, the good of the whole. Obviously, Martin Luther would have used more religious language than there, but yes, it's been fun to explore this, Michelle, as you and I have reflected on it, and to just think about how it's evolved for even my own life, and also to hear how people often assume that there, for me, was some burning bush moment, some like incredible clarity that this was the only thing I was ever meant to do in life, and I was going to pursue it 100%. And for me, a sense of call really came about through deep listening to myself, but also through the relationships in my life. I think we often forget how calling is relational. It develops in community with others. Rarely does it happen alone or in a vacuum. And for me, I found both that inward and outward piece of calling to be important in my own journey. And I continue to always come back to that sense of call, because I think call continues to develop and shift over time. It's not static or singular. It doesn't stay the same. We're dynamic and living and evolving beings. So why would our sense of call remain static? That also evolves and shifts as well.
It's super helpful. You need people to reflect certain observations and bear witness to things that you can't maybe see yourself.
Right. In fact, the call process for a pastor is built within that system of you have to show that you yourself have a sense of your own inner call, and a group of people have to reflect that they see that call in you as well. It's a really beautiful part of the process, that it's built to reflect that dual nature of inner and outer.
What we're talking about for the purposes of this podcast is a renewed look at calling. We're going to be interviewing so many different people and learning about their own moments of stuckness and those manure moments, or those shitty moments, let's be clear. The things that feel like failures but often lead to incredible moments of growth.
Yes. Even what we would project on saying like, look, they have it all together. They are in this amazing, fulfilling career. career, you peel back the layers and see all these moments of stuckness, detours, dead ends, and realize that everyone has that. We're all going to have the failures or the hardships or the places we've screwed up. And what can lead us in the shame spiral or the isolation is feeling like it's just me. Like I've made this mistake. And yet we're all making mistakes, especially if we're trying to grow and learn and change.
It is deeply reassuring hearing from people how they've had to figure out that twist or turn.
They had to experience that so much, and they even built a resilience to it in a way that often we let just the idea of failure, rejection, not allow us to walk down a path we might be curious about.
That is so critical to underscore. Every single person that we talk with has not had a linear journey.
Right.
Even yours is not linear.
Right.
And there is no such thing as a linear trajectory. However, all of the systems we encounter in our world are set up for a linear trajectory, as if it works that way. It's no wonder why we always feel some sense of friction or pain going through all of this. Everyone has a moment of stuckness where we really wish we had some sort of career GPS guiding us in a specific direction, telling us that's the right way.
There's a mirror there for other people to see their journeys through.
I think it's also really helpful to hear people talk about, why am I having this nagging feeling? Or why am I feeling these whispers? Why is it the same whisper that I keep hearing? And I think we all have these moments. It's just a questioning of, when do you listen to it? When do you actually do something about it?
It is so fascinating and beautiful to witness it in people's lives. It's the thread that continues to weave through people's stories. And when people are most in alignment, when they're finding the fulfillment that really makes them come alive, they're tapping into those deepest values, into that longing and listening to that and pursuing that. And that's the sense of calling that they are able to listen to and desire to follow that curiosity and be willing to take risks for it and to see how it's connecting them, not just to filling their own needs, but to serving others as well.
She's Dana Allen Walsh.
And she's Michelle Weise. This has been another episode of A Life Worth Working.
Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and loved ones who may also be searching for purpose and meaning in their work lives, or what we call the soul of work.